Okay, so good morning everyone. It's a great pleasure to fly 9,000 miles from Asia to New Orleans, but we find that it's very similar to Hong Kong in the sense that it's a great food paradise. It's a nice place here in New Orleans. But that being said, just a word of caution, we haven't watched actually the movie 50 Shades of Grey. But anyway, most, if not all of us in this world have actually been touched or influenced by a phenomenon we call made in China. Before I start, maybe I'll ask a raise of hands for 3 questions. Who among you here has actually had an Apple product? Who among you here drives around in a GM, Ford, or even a Chevy car? And who among you here has bought at least a pair of Nike shoes? All right, I was expecting the same answers because majority, if not all of us, have actually been touched by this phenomenon. All our lives, we have benefited much from it. In the past 30 years, much of the world has benefited a lot from it. But what our group would like to explore is the other side of this phenomenon. There are many lives and actually many costs to bringing these products to our daily lives. And so we, as consultants, would like to influence you as a fictional company of how we can uplift or uphold the rights and lives of Chinese workers in factories. So just a quick roadmap of what we will do this morning. First, we will start with an overview of the problem. Then we will move to a case study where we will explore both a success and also a failure story of how U.S. companies would deal with factory owners and factories in China. And then we move on to our solution. And then we look, instead of an economic return, we look at the social return. And finally, we look at an implementation plan of how we would proceed with our solution. As I mentioned earlier, almost everything has been made in China. It is the world's largest producer of goods, and just to put a point on that, an exclamation point of that, some facts. 90% of PCs have been produced in China. 2 out of every 3 shoes are produced in China. And at the other side of this spectrum, we see that there was a huge movement of people from the rural to the urban countries, urban areas, where we see that there were approximately 230 million of those working in factories. This is close to the size of the United States, approximately. So with the onset of globalization, there has been a drive to push down costs. And in this drive to push down costs, there have been many incidents in the past where lives have been lost or limbs have been lost. And in only the past 5 years, we look at two instances. One in 2011, where we see that there was a fire in the Apple factory which killed 3 people. And in 2014, there was an explosion in a GM plant doing hubcaps for GM cars, and this killed hundreds of people. But ultimately, if we take one step back, we realize that in 2014 alone, in the first 11 months, there have been 57,000 deaths associated with factories. So for those who are not very familiar, this is a quite simple way of putting how does the supply chain work in China. There are 3 main players. First is the company, I see, which has 2 options. Either it can go directly to the factories, or it can contract a third-party outsourcing agent, such as companies like Li and Fung. And then once the goods are made, they are shipped out to the country where they will be sold, and ultimately to the customer. So if you look at this diagram, there are 3 main proponents. One's the company, the second is the factories, and the third would be the customers. So to understand this pressure on costs in the last 5 years, we look at a pair of Nike shoes, a $100 pair of Nike shoes. And there we realized that close to 70% of the actual selling price of Nike shoes are actually associated for marketing and distribution and retail side of the business. So what does that mean? In terms of the real cost of a pair of Nike shoes, we estimate that there are just about 25% associated with the real cost. And of this 25%, a much smaller proportion goes into the labor cost. We estimate it at about $2 to $4 for a $100 pair of shoes. To understand further why there is tremendous pressure on factories or factory owners, we look at the Porter's 5 forces for the whole industry. And here we realized that there are 2 driving forces. First, there are very low barriers to entry in setting up a factory in China. Any person who has capital can actually just set up and compete with thousands of other factories in China. But ultimately, the ultimate say or the ultimate power in the whole industry would be the buyers. These are the companies like yours who dictate the price, the quantity, and the quality of the products that they want produced. And looking further into the top 10 experts of China, which account for about 60% of experts, we realize that there's actually a different levels of the manufacturing in China. It is not just clothing, it's not just vehicles, but a whole spectrum of manufacturing. And here we see that the bottom part, wherein we look at price as well as product complexity, would be the most vulnerable, because these people or these migrant workers are the ones with the lowest skill. As you move up the spectrum, workers aspire actually to be in this sphere because generally there are better working conditions within this sphere for like electronics, machines, and vehicles. And one clear point that we want to emphasize is that workers today are very different from the workers of the first generation after 1978. Workers today are young, they're technologically savvy, educated, and more demanding than their parents who came before them. But despite these shortcomings, there have been significant changes already which were implemented in the past, and you can capture this into 3 main buckets. The first reaction of companies would always be to implement a code of conduct. That is the most natural reaction to any negative publicity or any negative incident. That close to 50% of US companies have introduced this already. And then on the other side, on the public sector side, on the regulation, we see that there are very tight laws, both from the International Labor Organization standard as well as the labor contract law in China, which govern the rights of the workers. However, on the monitoring side, only 25% of these actually engage the workers directly. So one case of success is a story on Nike, wherein we saw that in the early 1990s, they had problems and negative publicity as to how they treated the factory workers who produced their goods. They came up with a number of initiatives, and one of them was actually to publish and be transparent and publish the whole list of their suppliers. This was done in early 2004. And then after that, they engaged the different stakeholders, both from the private sector and the public sector, to ensure that they have an engaged relationship with all the stakeholders. And so today, they have a very good relationship with all the stakeholders. On the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, we see GM, which I mentioned earlier, had a huge explosion in their plant and killed hundreds of people. They took a more passive and reactive approach in dealing with its suppliers. As you know, cars have hundreds or even thousands of components, and they cannot monitor every single bit of this supply chain. So what are the key insights that we realized? Number one, the rules, both from the private sector and the public sector, are actually sufficient. The problem lies in the implementation as well as aligning the incentives of the factory owners, the companies, as well as the factory workers. So we have come up with a solution which is simple, straightforward, and scalable to address the key issues. Our solution actually tackles the problem both inside the factory and outside the factory. The first is on microinsurance, where we align the incentives of both the factory worker and the company and provide a social safety net to avoid these incidents from happening again. Second, instead of random audits, physical audits, we will implement an simple online survey, and the twist is it will be answered by the factory workers themselves. And finally, we provide one-stop homes, or a venue where factory workers can actually address issues outside the factory when we collaborate with the NGOs. So I pass on to my colleagues to elaborate more.
Okay, good morning everyone. I would like to elaborate two solutions for this our cases today. So first is our macro insurance scheme. So I think this primarily protect the workers' interest, also motivate the workers to work in the safety environment in the company, in the factory. So the company will just sponsor the whole scheme. They would like to just pay all the 100% of the premium price in total, because they would like to motivate the factory owners to improve the factory safety in all. So if the factory owners were not just partially in compliance with these kind of things, they will pay 20% of the total premium. But if they are just non-compliant at all, so they will just pay the 40% of the total premium price. So this kind of scheme is managed and packaged by the insurance company as well. So the workers will benefit from in terms of the accidental injury and the medical treatment, also the sudden death as well. So from the table, you can have a general idea of the total coverage in terms of the amount in US dollars in these three areas. So there are, I think, total 4 stakeholders will be involved in this scheme. The first is, I think, company, the second, factory owners, and also workers and government as well. I think as for the factory owner, they would like to enhance their productivity, also increase their profit margin. So they would like to provide such kind of safe environment in their company to make them work safety as well. As for the companies, I think they would like to protect them against from the accident and incident. So they would like to just put such kind of scheme to avoid, to just protect them, to cause lives, and also protect them from the business disruptions as well. I think so for workers, you know, in China, the turnover rate is roughly about 65%. So I think the workers would like to work in such kind of factory, who would like to provide such schemes to protect their interest as well. So the turnover rate will dropping down as well. But fourth, as for the government officials would like to see a safer and easier conditions in China. So they will support such kind of factory and such kind of business in China to make it the conditions safer and workers are easier to just get their jobs. So this is the 4 stakeholders. Someone may ask, so whether this kind of scheme will just, whether it's practical or whether it will take a long time for you to go, I think it's not just a short time, we can just accomplish it. There are 4 steps for this scheme. The step 1 is we just sign the agreement with each supplier, the factory owners with the company. And then we just get the premium price from the insurance companies as well. Next, the company will do such kind of scorecard management in terms of the 3 points. I think finally, the company will do the annual performance review for all the factory owners to determine the fund allocation in the next year in terms of the premium price. Another solution is the online monitoring system for our case. So currently, our company, the company, we are just doing the auditing, something like that, for the factory owners. So this kind of things we are covered. We are design such kind of questionnaire through the online survey. We are covering the 4 areas. The first area is compensation. We will ask the question like, did I receive the right pay at the right time? And then second is safety. We will ask a question like, did I receive the monthly training on safety? And the third area is health. We will ask a question like, did I have access to the factory health clinic? And for others area, we will design some question like, was I allowed for an hour lunch break in the factory? So this is our general idea about the online survey. Someone will ask whether it will cost much or whether it's safe for the company, for the factory owners to do such kind of online survey and online monitoring system. The answer is yes. It's very, very easy to do as it's cost low. So there are some stakeholders incentives for this kind of things. I think, first of all, for the companies, they would like to get the information directly from the workers and not just from the factory owners as well. And as for the factory managers, they do not just want the internal audit, which will cost much in terms of time and money. So they would like to push such kind of online monitoring and feedback easily. And as for the workers, they can just give the direct response at any time, anywhere, if they find there is any issues in terms of their working conditions as well. So there are some behind factors I can just support our idea. For example, in China, there is a big increasing trend in terms of internet users. A lot of young users in China now. And also for the iCloud computing system, it's safety, I think also with lower cost as well. And the young workers are mainly just the new generation. They are more technologically savvy and more demanding than the last generation, their parents. So, and also someone may ask a question about whether it's simple, whether it's difficult for me to implement it, whether it's practical for the working levels. So I think it's just, there's no more physical audits anymore in the future. So the workers can just do the survey at home through their own devices or through their factory's devices. It's very easy to expand this kind of service to the other companies in China. But secondly, the information will be sent and also analyzed in the iCloud computing system. It's safe, and we can just calculate the premium of the macro insurance as well. As for the risk management, we can get the feedback from the users, and then we can just analyze which kind of factory owners and which kind of area we should pay attention to in the next time. Lastly, the company can use the information to design their whole compliance framework in the future. So next I will pass over to Clement.
Our next solution is the one-stop home. One-stop home is a solution that we will strengthen and collaborating with the current relationship with NGOs. We're going to build the facility centers together, like the workers and NGO together. We're going to specific the focus in 3 areas: education, health, and family. For education, normally we're going to have only like required skill for training for the staff, like assembly skill. But we're going to put more emphasis on the safety awareness on the factory as well. And we're going to have a free additional courses like language abilities, English and Mandarin, and health issue to educate them about what is it about the contagious disease, how can they eat more better, how can they protect themselves from that. Financial literacies, how can they spend money wisely, how can they save the money. And the last thing is using the technology in daily life to apply to the other previous 2 solutions, using mobile application, internet, how to use that. For the health, we're going to provide not only the promoting and supporting the current system, hotline, and website complaining about their working condition, tell them about the benefit, but also we have the free self-checkup, like a questionnaire as well. And the last one, family, we're going to launching a family bonding program and informal school for children. I will talk in detail later on. The reason that we are doing all these 3 because Now 70% of the migrant workers cannot finish their middle school. 50% of the migrant workers, they don't aware of the safe sex practice. 50% of them also live in a shared dormitory. Shared flat is very overcrowded and is a root cause for contagious disease. And there are 61 million children left behind when their parents go to work in the cities. And the children now in China, if you register for when you're born in one city, you cannot cross to the other city for using the facilities because they kind of separate. Like you born here, you have to use it here only. Okay. So for implementation in detail, for education, apart from the formal training in the factory and all the traditional classroom, we would like to introduce like newsletter across the factory. SMS, because SMS nowadays, that's from the statistics, 93% of the population in China already have mobile phone. But for mobile application and all the websites, we need to increase, it's like a future plan as well, but we can launch it now. Nowadays we have 40% who has smartphone, but the growth rate is around 300% per year, which is very nice. And the next thing is health, and for the health, apart from building the medical and sport facility, the basic one, and they want to promote about the hotline and online website for complaining about the factory working condition, because nowadays the workers they don't know the benefit of this. They just call to the hotline and tell them like about their love life, their partner, their children, those kind of things. And the next thing is the self-checkup. We're gonna have the questionnaire both online and offline. Like if you have, for example, if you have one of these 3 conditions, please go to see the doctor at the medical centers. And we're going to educate them about, contagious disease, how to make it better in your, if you have some kind of this condition, just go to the doctors. And the last one, for the family bonding program, it consists of 2 parts. A free call to homes. We're going to implement a technology like Skype that all the migrant workers can go to the centers and make a free call to their children. But the problem is, the children doesn't have a mobile phone, so we already had some kind of this in like a second-hand phone campaign, because in one schools, in one village, they're gonna have like 1 mobile phone, but we're gonna promote this more to have more access for the parent to connect with the children. And the next thing, we're gonna setting up an informal communities, like a learning community board for the migrant workers and their children as well, so they can have like a tutorial class, at least like a basic education for them if they move with their parents. But the nice and the best thing is to build a semi-public schools in that area, but this is the hardest one to implement, because normally in China, if you have to have a school, any kind of school, you have to get an approval from the government, which is very difficult to get one, but it's going to be the more sustainable one. And for the return on investment, definitely not only the number. The number for the first 2 in microinsurance and online monitoring is not that. We don't have to spend a lot of money. The most ambitious one going to be the one-stop home, around $10,000 US. And all of this, we also get a social benefit as well. Like Yang said earlier, a happy worker, better productivity. From the surveys of the World University, is around 12% increasing. And we have a better, less turnover, less cost of training, and a better relationship between the factory owners and the migrant workers. And the last thing is the strengthen our leaks management, because nowadays there has a strong law and regulation in China, but the problem is about enforcement. Here is our timeline. The first 2 again is we can do it right away, immediately, not have to take so much time. For the one-stop home, it will take around half year. And we believe that our solution is simple, straightforward, and scalable to create a healthy and happy workers, to create a sustainable growth for the company. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and you have 20 minutes of question and answer. Okay. Okay, so as we begin, I was not clear in the beginning. Who are we, the audience to whom you're speaking? Who is your client?
Our intention was for the judges to be
one of the companies that has existing or would like to set up existing relationships with the factories.
Okay. In the context of the legal aspects, I'm assuming the company that we are is a company domiciled in the United States?
Yes.
Okay. So, of course, there are many examples of companies domiciled in the U.S. that have manufacturing in China.
Yes.
Are the laws that we're considering principally Chinese laws, or are they American laws, or both? For the sake of the legal.
From the legal perspective, we looked at it from the Chinese perspective because all factories are actually covered by Chinese law. And in fact, most of these factories are outsourced. It is quite rare that the facility is actually owned or operated by the US company, although there are instances that it's like that. And as we mentioned in our one slide, we realized that there are a number of laws already, the Chinese labor code, which is very strict already in promoting the rights of workers. But the problem really is in the implementation stage, because the relationship between a company and the factory owner is one of being outsourced. The factory is just as good as the goods that they produce.
Okay.
But the companies realize, sometimes in hindsight, that there are tremendous costs, both in reputational and real economic risks for the companies when it blows up and people get hurt or people, in worst case, die. So that is the framework that we were trying to work around with.
Very good, and I follow that discussion. So you mentioned, and you explained up front, which I thought was good, that there are companies that own assets in China, that have manufacturing facilities and resources in China, and those are owned by that company. And then there are third-party scenarios wherein an independent contractor is making the product for a company and then selling it to that company for eventual transportation, shipping, redistribution, and so forth. So is the gap in compliance and implementation, is that in the context of both of those scenarios, or just more one or the other?
Yeah, it's more geared towards the outsourced type of relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So companies that own assets, operate their own factories in China, hire local workers, it's not so much the problem.
Yes, because in the U.S., if China is strict, the U.S. is even more, I suppose, a little bit stricter in that sense. So our focus was on that kind of relationship, which accounts for perhaps like majority of the relationships that we see.
In China, mostly the foreign companies will have such kind of cooperation or some contract-based. They will buy the products from such kind of factories, and I think most factory owners are just do not have just a higher education. They have a lower education. Just open the factory maybe 20 or 30 years ago during the reform of China, the beginning of the reform of China. So the Chinese laws, I think, it just covers some areas. In terms of the working conditions, the workers' safety, and also the workers' benefits as well. But in China, there are some gray areas for the factory owner to seek to just lower the cost and just do not build enough infrastructure for these workers to live in or to work in the factory. So as for the foreign companies, such as the companies in the US, they have the strict law to control. They would like to monitor this kind of factories, the factory owners in China, to do the business in compliance, not just do the business sell just randomly to meet the on-site checking at one time. They will do the long-term, that's consistent as well.
Okay, so more so in the model of a third party.
Yeah.
What is the...
Also, just to add to that, based on our research, these factory owners actually cater to more than just one brand. Most of the time, it's not exclusive to one. It can be perhaps that they're making shirts for a number of companies, like 3 companies or 3 brands. So it's although they're exclusive relationships, there are these types of nuances to the relationship.
Okay. Just my last question for him. So in the context of a third-party arrangement where a factory owner is, as you explained, and I follow that, often providing products to, in the context of multiple contracts to a foreign company, maybe US-based, what is the liability to the factory owner if the ownership does not change or improve or incurs risk by virtue of a faulty product? If they're otherwise satisfying the terms of the contract and what's expected of them.
In terms of that, if the third party cannot meet, if I understand your question, is that if the third party cannot comply with the regulation and all the satisfy about the requirement from the companies, right?
Yeah.
Normally, the companies, it's so hard nowadays. It's very hard for them, for the brand or all the companies to detect what is going on in the factory. Normally, we're gonna detect only like the last product that is like defect product. But generally now we have like audit. They come like frequently, like maybe 4 times a year. But generally, it's all set up. Everything is all set up. The employees already have been the list of questions that, okay, what I have to answer, that the audit come in, and even all the books and all the accounting record, they have separate book as well. So it's just quite hard for the brand to detect what is the actual manufacturing are doing. And normally they try to, the best example is Nike, because Nike, they are now having their own auditors coming, not generally it's the outsider, I mean, the brand gonna hire an outsider auditors to go and check at the factory frequently, like 4 times a year. But now Nike, they already hire their own teams, go to audit more frequent. But anyway, the problem is still be that the factory and or the manufacturing plant, they don't allow much like coming in from the auditors because they're gonna say, oh, this is kind of like an interrupt and everything. So generally, if they break the contract or miss the contract, they're gonna have some penalties. But anyway, it's so hard to detect.
And just to add to that, I think factory owners face 2 kinds of risk, both on the regulator side as well as the company side. And if it's a direct relationship between the company and the factory owners, then if they don't produce the goods up to a certain quality standard, then they face the risk of not getting the business after. And this is huge because the margins in these types of manufacturing are quite slim. And it would be in the interest of the factory owner to come up with products which are at par or even better than the specifications of the company. And then on the other hand, we mentioned two methods of dealing with factories. The second one is to contract a third-party outsourcing agent. In that case, if the products are not up to par, then the third-party contracting agent like Li & Fung will be liable to the company.
Okay. Thank you.
I was not familiar with the term microinsurance.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you could define that for me.
Okay.
But also, it was not clear to me how having microinsurance, although obviously that is better for people who don't have any insurance, how that is related to safety. In the company.
Basically, microinsurance is a growing trend in the industry, wherein we allow those within the lowest rungs of society to access insurance based on a mass base. This has been done in India, in my country, in the Philippines. It has been done also, wherein the premiums cannot go higher than 5% of the daily wage. But in this case, the burden is borne by the company. That's the innovation that you would like to look at it, but it's stratified into different levels of compliance, so that if they comply with all the standards that we set, then it's a company that has to pay the premium. But if it doesn't comply, then it goes lower, like as low as 60%. So there's incentives for both the factory owner as well as the company to actually do it. And in terms of how it relates to safety, I agree that to a certain extent, it's a safety net for the factory workers, and it does not do much in terms of directly addressing the safety issue. But we believe that as the factory owners try to comply with these strict standards, then we also cover that part of that part of the spectrum. And you have to understand also that these factory owners or factory workers are products of the one-child policy. So this means that if they lose their ability to be a productive part of the factory, then a lot of the other dependents will actually it won't be good for them. And so this type of incentive is actually quite good for the workers. And we have seen, and based on our research, that China Life Insurance has actually tried to start it at some pockets of... but the problem is if you don't align the incentives with the actual KPIs that you would like to achieve, then it won't work because people won't buy it. People will say, okay, it's an added cost, 5% added to my cost, blah, 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 blah. But if you put it from a context of wages have risen double digits in the past 10 years in China, then the 5% which covers me, both my workers and my factory, will also be a very good thing. And finally, I think the main idea that we had in our second solution, which was the survey, was that this actually defines the very basic needs and rights that workers are. If you notice, the questionnaire was very straightforward. Was I paid at the right time, at the right pay, and all those other types of questions, with the mentality that if a factory owner is able to deliver on the very basic needs of the factory workers, then there is a much higher chance that they will deliver on the other things which are more complicated, like the factory safety and all those other issues.
To add more from me part, for the micro, definitely we're gonna have like a holistic solution that educate them about the safety awareness first, like protecting first. But if something really bad just happen, then just kind of make sure that okay, they have their backup plan, their safety plan for them.
Because if the factory owners, if they are not compliant, not just doing something wrong with the safety, working safety environment, they will be charged for the premium price during the next year in terms of the degree. Also, I think from the scorecard management, the company will set up such kind of scorecard in terms of the feedback from the online monitoring, whether the company, whether factories do good job or not. Also, they will get the information from the regulators, from the media and exposure, such kind of things. Also, they combine this together to the scorecard, and they can just define how much I will charge you during the next year. This is kind of a push the factory owners to do better step by step, because for manufacturing industry in China, the profit margin is quite small. It's roughly about 2.4% in China. It's quite lower.
Sort of two questions. The first is just a detailed question. If I heard you correctly, you said 93% of Chinese people have a mobile phone.
Yes.
But then I thought you said about 40% have smartphones.
Yes.
But then you are also setting up a system where people reach out to their families at these centers because they don't have phones. They can't connect to them otherwise. So I'm sort of, could you explain where the lack of, if 93% don't have them, how come they don't have them at home?
Okay. So. Actually, like most of the people have their mobile phone, but the kids, I mean, generally the grown-up already had a mobile phone, but the problem is the kids back home, normally they don't have a phone. That's the part of it. And so we kind of would like to make it safe for them instead of calling the kids. Some people doesn't, I mean, if the kid doesn't have a phone, the parent cannot call them, right? But if they had one, we can introduce them like a Skype call, like a free call at the centers, so they can call back home for free as well to create more opportunity for them to call back home more frequently.
Okay, so
Okay.
this would be part of the package
Yes.
that a
Part of the
company like
package.
ours would absorb or would
Yes.
pay for
Yes.
that connectivity.
Yes.
Where rather than giving it to the workers and saying, just
Yes.
you all buy additional phones for your family.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
But now the bigger question I have is that a lot of what you talked about, and it's very detailed and very well thought out, seems to be more addressed towards risk avoidance. As a company, what's the benefit to us in the realm of public opinion? Because nobody's going to see these actions. How are we going to benefit by putting money out toward these efforts when all we're doing is essentially helping this individual, that individual, and preventing explosions, fires, losses of limbs? You know, how do people know what we're doing? What do we get? What's the ethics?
From a messaging, there are two main benefits for a company. One is on a messaging perspective, and what we realize, and the second is on added productivity based on better, happier workers. And on messaging alone, I think once a company gets to lock in a good collaborative relationship with these factory owners, then it becomes much smoother, so that your long-term relationship would be better than having just like a contract-based relationship. And from an additional productivity perspective, Pitch mentioned earlier
12%.
12%, yeah,
Higher
an increase for those who are happier and all that. Although on the surface it might seem like it's all preventive, we realize that this is actually what is missing in the whole system. And we also hope that by implementing these types of initiatives, we also cover, as I mentioned earlier, indirectly the core issues like safety and others. But our focus was mainly on the workers themselves, in and outside the factories. So there are other issues like safety hazards and all those, but those are governed by other laws and other issues.
And to add more from me, in terms of, employees' perspective, once you work in a good working condition, definitely they're gonna talk to each other, because like the society and the migrant worker that are living in, it's very, they are very connected to each other, very packed, and when they kind of move the job a lot when they know that, okay, this is pay better, the working condition is better, like Yang said earlier, the turnover rate is around 63%. So it's mean like if you have a better reputation on the working condition and everything, all the worker or the good one gonna come to you. And
So to that point though, if you already did say that any of these factories support more than just our company's efforts, they're going to be providers,
Yes.
manufacturers for 14 other companies, my direct competitors or our direct competitors. We're going to be subsidizing the benefits to those companies. What's in it for us? Again, I'm looking for
Okay.
something. There's a business case here. Ignoring that, what's the ethics of it? What am I going to get out of it as a company that we're going to benefit and that our efforts are worth it in the public marketplace?
Okay, on the other way around, if it's in the news as well, for example, the factory that has when it has on the news, they are going to list out, they know that so many suppliers for this factory, for example, like factory A, but the one is going to be on the news is the biggest brand generally as well. So if we put effort for this, we can protect definitely our brand reputation. If something bad happens, definitely our brand gonna be on the news first one if we are the biggest one.
You mentioned more,
Sorry, to add more information based on Peter's explanation. So I think in China, for example, one factory can accept many deals from different foreign companies, such as Nike or Adidas, something like that. But there's a serious competition in China. There's not only just one factory owners, just one factory to provide such kind of service, such kind of product. There are a lot of factories in Guangdong area, in different kinds of areas in China. So due to the, I think the highly competition in China, they would like to attract the brand in their factory, not just like the brand owner, the company live from their factory. So they try to just do anything the brand or the company would like them to do. So this is one point. I think the other point is the business disruption. I think both the factory owners and the companies, they do not like to see such kind of business disruption. If there is any disruptions, there may be cause some penalties from the regulators. Also, they cannot provide product in time. So it's as for the contract base, if you cannot provide the product in time, that means a large amount of the penalties in China.
Okay, we are out of time. Okay. Thank you very much. This is a big topic, obviously. And I know it's clear you've spent a lot of time studying it. I appreciate that to some extent you're geographically close to it, and I appreciate that being in Asia, this is even more dimensions and significance than it does for those of us removed by the Pacific Ocean on the other side, and who otherwise are just consumers of Chinese-made goods. I think your presentation was very good. If there was a challenge, perhaps it may have been simply trying to manage the scope and the breadth of the topic and challenges that come with that. I work for a company that is looking to manufacture in China. I've worked for companies that manufacture in China. I've had folks on my teams working in China. And I appreciate and understand many things you've talked about. When I went to business school, I did case studies on situations similar to this. As you bring the issue forward, I think there's an opportunity in the context of organization, okay? If only because it will help your judges in other formats like this better understand and follow what otherwise is a very well understood topic and one you've researched quite a bit.
Yep.
Okay. So I would encourage you to consider organization and just by virtue of the way you'll, I think, add more structure, more discipline, and make it a better presentation. And in turn, your recommendations, I think, will be better understood more readily also. Okay.
Mara, since you didn't get a chance to ask questions, would you like to give feedback? Okay. I have a few comments here. Didn't mean to skip what we're skipping. But I really liked the introduction using humor, and that made a good connection with us. I like the examples that you gave to connect us emotionally to the topic in terms of the products that we use that are made in China. Some thoughts on your slides. I like the graphics here, but I think it would be more effective if you did not have so many words on the slides. I found myself trying to listen to you and also read some of the content on the slides. A lot of the words could be put into your notes section, unless you really want us to read the slides. And so, see here. I do think that it was obvious that you put in a tremendous amount of work into this. You came out with some interesting solutions, and in some respects, it seems a little overly ambitious, you know, in terms of the scope. You could have focused just on the microinsurance or just on the home idea. I think both of those were very innovative. And also I think maybe spending some time really drawing more specifically to the ethics and the legal dimensions, calling those out a little bit more would have been helpful. And so, thank you.
Yeah, I would just sort of building on what you said, but this idea of the examples that you gave, the individuals, if you could translate out the micro-ethical benefits of this, what does it mean to the individuals and how they are then able to exist in a more ethical environment, have a more socially, have improved lives. I think if you could do a little more to translate out those small, tiny benefits and the massive accrual that will happen when you have all of those taking place, and then society benefits, the company benefits, the world benefits. The ethics of it, I think we can make a better case for that.
Thank you. Well, it was a great pleasure to present in front of you. We'll try to work on some of the slides for tomorrow. Was short.
Thank you. It's tremendous work that you put into this. And so thank you for coming here. And also the challenges of coming and presenting in the second language.
Yes.
That is huge, and I recognize that, and I applaud you all for doing a very good job in that. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you before, I appreciate in Hong Kong the language is Cantonese, so each of you I appreciate speaks obviously English. I know, of course, you probably speak a native language, Thai or Mandarin, and I have a friend from the Philippines, I'm forgetting the native language, but I know it's influenced by the Spanish.
Yeah.
But you speak Cantonese as well?
No, we speak a little bit of Mandarin.
Okay.
Because Cantonese is very local to
The local language in Hong Kong, in Guangdong province. Yeah.
So I mean, locally, when the firms that look into China, they speak Mandarin mostly.
Understood. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.